Welcome back to the channel. In the last video, we ended with a comparison to understand the nature of testimony as a source of knowledge from events. In the comparison, I presented the following hypothetical testimonies side by side. One was, it was 3 o'clock on the dot when we started to make the rite of exorcism. When it was 15 hours and 15 minutes, the person walked straight to a wide and flat wall of the church and climbed as if there was no gravity. She was horizontal to the ground for at least 1 minute. Compare that to this other first-hand testimony. There was this case where a person climbed a wall like a spider. When we are talking about nowadays testimonies, not those of ancient origins, which I will talk about later in another video, there are several signs you can use and questions you can direct to probe its credibility. In this case, I think it's very simple to understand that the first testimony has more credibility for a few reasons. One, the amount of details of the description suggests a first-hand experience. Moreover, the details of the hours and minutes suggest it was either something that happened recently, or that the person made personal notes after the event, or shared multiple times with other people, or that the person has a really good memory. 2. Another detail is that the person seemed to have control of their senses to tell how much time was passing and so on, which suggests she wasn't being controlled by fear, anxiety, or something similar. 3. The fact that the supernatural experience is described occurring in a wide and flat wall helps, because if the wall had other things on it or indentations, any person could have climbed it, and it would be easier to confuse the event with a supernatural event instead of a natural event. 4. The final fact of the description as to how this climbing occurs is also important to remove the possibility of a natural process. The person is walking on the wall horizontal, not using their strength to act against gravity, and the experience is not ephemeral, which makes imagining the whole process harder than otherwise. It is still possible to hallucinate the whole experience, but it's much more difficult than otherwise. Another important aspect to remember here is the fact that if this experience is said to be not a first-hand account and something that happened many years ago, the amount of details could actually speak against its credibility instead of its favor. Can you understand why that would be the case? Leave it in the comments if you have the answer for this question. Now, on the second case, you can see how all the elements present in the first case are absent. 1. Little to no details, which suggests a second-hand or third-hand account. It doesn't mean it is incorrect, but the possibilities stack against it and not in favor. In the interview, these two different testimonies can be compared so you can understand the difference between a first-hand and a second-hand account. The testimony he gives on the first case is, and I quote, "This person raised a metal silver chair above its head with one hand, and the person who did that didn't weigh even 100 pounds. When compared to the moment 21 minutes and 28 seconds of the video, when he says, and I quote, "People have shared stories about once the demon manifests, it crawls up a wall like a spider," end quotes. You see that we don't know how and where were these walls, if they were flat or bricks or anything at all, and what was the situation when this exactly happened, how much time the person crawled up the wall, if he stayed there or if he didn't stay there and simply jumped from there to the ground. We don't know. Why we don't know? Because it's not a first-hand account. You can't ask the questions you need to ask for a person who experienced the thing in first hand. Might as well be true or false, but we don't have enough details to make a better judgment. Thus, believing in those will fall directly in the matter of 1. Pre-existing belief in the supernatural events or spirits. 2. Pre-existing belief in the occurrence of such events nowadays. Because it's not because you believe in miracles that you necessarily believe that the same miracles happen today or every day or nowadays. And 3. Acceptance of the credibility of the witness themselves. That is, the honesty of the person talking, the character of the person, what is at stake for this person, and what they gain or lose by lying to you. All of those criteria apply to any and all testimonies. But in the first case, that you have more details, you can have a better credibility of the story, because the more details you give to a story, the harder it is to keep pretense when the story is challenged, when the details are challenged. That's one of the reasons a lawyer will always recommend its clients that you don't give statements to any police. Why? Because even if you have good intentions, you might remember things incorrectly, and those details you give can and will be used against you. Now, in the last but still important symptom of possession that he speaks of, it is speaking in unknown language to the subject. And in this case, like the case of crawling up walls like a spider, we are given little to no details of what happens. He mentions various times of people talking in Latin, and one specific case of people talking in ancient Greek, which I assume he is not referring to actually ancient Greek, but koinê Greek of the Bible, because ancient Greek is the Greek used in ancient classical literature with the Attic dialect and others, while koinê Greek evolved from those. So what we have to analyze here is whether or not they really talked in these other languages with almost to no detail given. So it is a very difficult task. We don't know how much they talked in said languages. 2. We don't know if they used simple words, phrases, or if there was a complete dialogue with questions and answers back and forth. 3. In the first place, most people, even those who study koinê Greek and Latin, don't know how to converse in those languages. This is important. So how exactly he was able to make the judgment that this person is not simply repeating memorized phrases? If we had more details, we would be able to get a better picture of the credibility of such testimony. Another thing that would make this process more reliable would be using an expert in ancient languages, much in the same way it is used for psychiatrists and medics, to actually hear what these people say, to try and converse with them. But as we know, such arrangements are not given, not even recordings of their speech analysis for later, which could be done by the church itself. Fourth, lastly, we have always the possibility of an echo chamber. People who are hypnotized and suggested to speak in another language will swear to you that they spoke anything you can imagine. Similarly, people around can arrive in the same conclusion by the influence of the situation. Reason why it would be so important to make a recording and analyze it in a different context, away from the situation, away from the influences of the moment and the context. Another important detail is that, for some unknown reason, demon seems to prefer talking in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. That detail seems unimportant. However, a skeptic will always raise questions when there are coincidences. It just so happens that the Bible was written in koinê Greek and Hebrew, and the rites of the Catholic Church and the exorcism itself is done in Latin. First question: would be the case that there is an immersion of both the people performing the rites and the possessed in those languages, influencing the belief that the conversation took place in those languages? B. Why not talk in other languages unknown to the priest or to the subject, like Japanese? Why that is never the case? Or we don't have such type of testimony. So far, I never heard of it. So, C. Why not talk in languages that are used nowadays and that can be easily recognized by people around? For instance, if you try to pass as someone who knows Portuguese or Spanish, would it be easier or harder to fool someone than if you used a very difficult and ancient language? So, which would be harder? Fool someone that you know how to speak Portuguese, or fool someone that you know how to speak an ancient language that almost no one knows how to talk using that language? In the next video, I'm going to make a summary of my conclusions and the questions we raised, and we're going to discuss the theology behind the possessions inside and outside the Bible. As I always say, don't accept things as they appear, and always ask questions.